We'll go ahead and get started. Please feel free to use that chat window throughout the next hour or so to connect with each other, share some ideas. There's also a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Those questions will go directly to me, and I'm going to spend 10 to 15 minutes at the end of this broadcast answering your questions as we kind of move throughout this webinar. So again, thank you so much everyone for joining. My name is Megan. I am an engagement manager for Bang the Table. I am based in New York City, and the rest of the Bang the Table staff is in Boulder, Colorado. That's where our home office is. Let me go ahead and apologize to you if you can hear some background noise. If any of you have ever been to New York City, you'll know that the entire city is under construction 24/7, including my apartment where I'm broadcasting from today. So I'm trying to wear some headphones to mitigate that noise, but I do apologize if you can hear that in the background. A bit about myself. I am a former local government employee. I managed the marketing and communications team in Lakewood, Colorado for 5 years before joining the Bang the Table team in January of this year, and moved out to New York and have been here working for Bang the Table ever since. For those of you who aren't familiar with Bang the Table, we are a community engagement company. We were founded in Australia 11 years ago by two city planners who found themselves on Tuesday night having the same conversations with the same 5 people that they have every Tuesday night. And they kind of looked at each other and thought, we can do better. So Bang the Table was born, and our engagement platform, Engagement HQ, was developed shortly thereafter with the help of some really tech-savvy individuals. And now we've got more than 11 years of research practice and experience behind us. We've got a global team, more than 350 clients worldwide, and a network of more than 10,000 projects launched to date. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about how online community engagement can support some meaningful policy change. We're going to talk about 4 different cities, so Austin, Texas, Lakewood, Colorado, Golden, Colorado, and Boulder, Colorado, and ways that they use their online space to kind of leverage a bigger community or to have a bigger conversation with their community around some topic-specific issues. Wanted to give a quick shout out again to ELGL. Thank you so much for having us as part of your new webinar series. Please follow along with Kirsten, who's live tweeting today with ELGL50. That's their Twitter account. And the hashtag for this webinar and all future webinars is ELGL Tech. Also wanted to remind everyone that August 15th is City Hall Selfie Day. That's coming up. They've got a lot of really fun stuff on their website. So if you pop over to elgl.org, you can sign up to win prizes. You can download their media kit so you can get prepared at your physical space, at your City Hall space. And yeah, just get excited to participate on the 15th. So I've already talked about Bang the Table. I think I'll leave that there. I'll take this moment to say that I'm going to share all of the slides from today's webinars with you, so you don't have to worry about taking too many notes. If you don't like to, you can just kind of follow along. I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking through these case studies. And then, like I said, I'll leave the last 15 minutes open for Q&A. So as your questions bubble up along the way, please use the Q&A window, ask whatever you'd like, and I'll do my best to answer all of those at the end of today's webinar. So why are we here? I'm sure there's lots of different thoughts from your side, from your experience as to why you might want to launch a community engagement process, but the main ones are that your community has expectations around how, where, and when you communicate with them. So as the world changes, as technology grows, so do your community's expectations. This also brings about a new opportunity for you to build some trust with your community. So leveraging the online space to create some transparency and trust with your community is a new functionality that we should all be really, really excited about. And social media, unfortunately, is no longer a trusted space for factual, relevant information. I'll speak a little bit more to social media in a few minutes, but for now, I think we'll just kind of leave it there. Your staff is stretched, and it's also difficult to manage internal processes. So if starting a community engagement process makes you think, oh gosh, where are we going to find the time? Who's going to manage that? Who has the who has the internal resources and capacity to facilitate something like that. What I would say is that with enough thought and strategy and process put into the planning of a good community engagement strategy, you really might see that kind of day in and day out management of the conversation actually decrease. So we will flip over to survey findings. This is a survey that Bang the Table did a couple years ago, and we found that 71% of respondents don't attend public meetings. We all know some of the reasons behind that. It might be access issues or scheduling issues, or maybe even a perception of what one has to know or be like to be able to interact with government in that kind of face-to-face place. There's some intimidation around that as well. There are people that are kind of scared about showing up at City Hall and speaking directly to kind of the change makers in their community. 83% of people expressed interest in participating on their own time. So even if they weren't showing up, they still had an interest in having a voice. 43% said that governments are good at keeping citizens informed. While that's a lower number, I would just look at that as opportunity. That's just an opportunity to do better. And then 88% think that community engagement can possibly change outcomes in their community. Most people did say that they feel that government cares about public opinion. So when you look at these numbers holistically, it just gives you a great opportunity to examine where you can do better at meeting people where they're at, inviting them into your conversations. Building trust. So one of the best benefits of online community engagement is that you are able to meet people where they're at. You can reach a wider audience and genuinely listen to their feedback. This sets you up for success. I would argue that it'll make your job easier because you're feeling more confident about the decisions that you're making. They're data-driven decisions. And then you're creating some trust and transparency with your public. Larger audiences also go a long way in sidelining the loudest voices. So we all know who kind of the positive and negative folks are on the side of any one issue. We love those people. They show up, they're loud, we need them, but they also have a tendency to kind of discourage that, that medium participation. So just a little anecdote, my former boss, Allison Shuck, who some of you may know, working in Lakewood, Colorado, and I used to chase people out of public meetings because they would come and they'd sit and they'd pay attention, and then they'd get up and leave without filling out a comment card or doing dot voting or anything like that. And we'd kind of get out to the hallway and say, hey, thanks so much for coming. What did you think of our proposed plan? And they'd all go, oh yeah, looks great. Good job. Keep up the good work. And we would say, okay, yeah, thank you so much. Can you please write that down? So we're still mitigating some of that, or yeah, I guess mitigating some of that perception that you don't speak to your government officials unless you're angry about something. So kind of giving this safe space for people to engage online is a way of inviting those moderate voices into your conversation. Lastly, equity isn't a checkbox. It's critical that you meet your audiences where they're at and engage with them in a way that's meaningful to them. A couple stories from the road. So myself and all of my coworkers at Bang the Table, most of us are former city government folks, and we all do a fair bit of traveling, researching, speaking, as well as hosting community roundtables for people in local government to connect with one another and talk about community engagement. And along the way, we hear lots of scary stories about things that are happening in communities. And if you have any that are similar, please pop in the chat and share. Positive or negative, we'd like to hear it all. But one of the scariest / saddest stories I heard was a resident group in a small town that was so against a proposed zoning change that they got together, pooled their money, and spent more than $1,000 on Facebook running a smear campaign, just rife with misinformation about the project. So that's one of the issues that government employees are up against. We also talked to a gentleman who worked on a bike lane project for years, only to have a new department head come in and shut down the project in a single day. These are all just, things that happen day in and day out. There are also things that can be prevented if you have a community engagement process in place. It is very hard to kill a project that the community knows about and that the community is invested in. It's also very hard to, it's easier to mitigate misinformation, rumor mills, echo chambers around certain projects when you're out and you're visible and you're sharing a really quality swath of information to your folks. The last story was about some projects that were fully funded and approved by City Council, but the city hadn't talked to the community about them before approving them. The citizens got together, they rallied, and they ended up shutting down the projects. So you all know these stories, you've heard them before, just good reasons to launch and maintain those kind of quality community engagement conversations. So we'll start talking about our case studies today. I'm going to flip back and forth between these slides and the engagement spaces that each of these cities use to kind of facilitate their conversations. One, to show you some of their best practices in action, and two, so you don't have to stare at PowerPoint slides for this whole hour. We'll first start by talking about the city of Golden. It is a community of about 20,000 people just outside of Denver. Really beautiful space, home to the Coors Brewery and Colorado School of Mines, and a lot of really fantastic hiking trails and a very vibrant downtown. This is a picture you can see there of their kind of downtown gateway. Golden was looking at making some changes to their short-term rental regulations, so that in the world of the sharing economy and Airbnb, cities are having to start having these conversations about how they're going to welcome these sort of businesses into their communities in a way that's still comfortable for the existing businesses and homeowners and renters. So Golden initially started discussing social media they started discussing short-term rentals on their social media accounts. Very quickly, those spaces went from being productive to being rife with misinformation and some infighting. Also, the community members were expecting real-time responses to their social media posts. So that kind of set up an unrealistic expectation for their staff members that they were going to be monitoring and responding to these conversations well into the night and early in the morning. So Golden decided to kind of meet this head on. They created an online engagement space to host conversations, and they used their existing social media channels to market this new engagement space. So in this space, Golden saw the community narrative and discussion change in just 4 weeks. So we are going to pop over and have a look at that real quick. So their city site, or their engagement space, is called Guiding Golden. And this is what it looks like. So their short-term rentals conversation existed here in this space exclusively. And let's see. So we're going to look at some of the things that they did really, really well in this space. I talk about quality of information. I talk about kind of factual information out. We need that factual information in order to have an agreed set of things that we're going to engage on. So what Golden did is they included all of this kind of relevant information and related information in a document library. They also synthesized what's going on with their current zoning laws and their current short-term rental regulations. So they gave people the opportunity to look at the kind of snapshot of information here on the left, or if people wanted to take a deeper dive, they've got a document library over here. Wherever and whenever you can synthesize information, do it. There are going to be people that want to see and read every single word, period, and comma. Great, give them that opportunity. But also, don't be afraid to take a really complex issue, sit down with your team and bullet it out to 5 to 10 things. You want to give people just enough to know, to start from that factual place. Another thing that they did really well is that they attached a person to their project. So Amber is a planner with the city of Golden. You can see her phone number and her email address here, as well as her face. I think this goes a long way in doing a couple of things. It creates some trust and transparency in the project and in the process. Participants know that Amber is a real person. She's listening, she's monitoring the comments. And so anything that's said in this space isn't going out into the ether of the internet. It's actually being seen and listened to by members of the staff of the city of Golden. It also creates some expectation for decorum around the site. So when you're using this kind of synthesized engagement space that's outside of Facebook, that's outside of social media and maybe Nextdoor and some of your other platforms in which you converse with your public, you're seeing less of that kind of organizing trolley behavior that you might see in social media, because this is a government created, it's a government invited space. So there's a little bit of an expectation for decorum and professionality here. Some other things that they've done really well is because this site was because this issue was so rife with misinformation, they put a public Q&A tool up online. So if you or any of your staff members find themselves answering the same questions over and over again, highly recommend launching a public Q&A space. So not only does that cut down on the time that you have to answer the same question over and over again, it allows people to see other people's questions, ask their own, they get answered in a public space. It helps cut down on some of that misinformation. Another thing that they did that went a long way in getting some richer feedback is they deployed some different tools in order to collect feedback from their public. Surveys are amazing for getting that kind of transactional data, the quick facts, or the temperature on a topic. They did launch a short-term rental regulation survey here, asking some questions about potential regulatory changes, providing feedback on how the community would like to see those regulations changed. And then they also launched a forum to allow people to leave longer term or longer form feedback. So you get that kind of quick transactional information, but then you invite people to take a deeper dive with you. It gives them an opportunity to share ideas that maybe didn't bubble up in the survey, or kind of leave other comments or narratives around the topic. The outcome of this project was that they had study sessions, and they ultimately updated their ordinance on May 24th of this year to institute some short-term rental licensing, as well as some regulations around those types of dwellings. Okay, we're going to pop. So a conversation about Golden is kind of a conversation about social media. As a former marketing person, as a communications person, I will own that social media is a tremendously powerful tool to help you get the word out about these conversations that you're having. But it shouldn't be the only place that you're actually trying to have these conversations. In fact, I would say wherever possible, if you can host a separate dedicated space that is home to the different engagement tools that you're using, whether it's on your city site or whether it's on a platform like Engagement HQ, I would recommend doing that in all instances. It's really difficult to build trust through social media. It should be a key component in your strategy, but only to share information about the project and then direct the conversation back to your engagement space. There's also some elements of trust and fear that go into social media, particularly Facebook. It's not always a welcoming space to everybody, again, particularly those moderate voices. And then for you as a manager, it's hard to see the big picture or full conversation when all of the conversations are fragmented. They might be having, the conversations might be existing on different channels within Facebook or Nextdoor or Twitter. And there's, at least in my experience, I've stumbled across conversations that I didn't even know were happening in my community just because they weren't happening on our pages. So if you're very explicit about where and when you're listening to your public, particularly in your engagement space, you can kind of mitigate some of that trolling, that online organizing, and the kind of shout wars that tend to happen on social media. Lastly, social media gives you very little data about who you're talking to, if any at all. So you don't necessarily know if these people are members of your community. It's hard to figure out their motivations or the whys behind their participation. So again, a great tool, but definitely not one to hang your hat on. Okay, popping forward to Boulder. We love Boulder, Colorado. This is our home office for Bang the Table. All of my other coworkers work out of a very beautiful office that is right here on Pearl Street in downtown. So we're really proud to have partnered with them and be able to support an effort to gather information about municipal broadband in the city. So in 2014, the city of Boulder recognized that they were kind of lagging in Wi-Fi, both in their public spaces and then also for some of their residents and businesses in their community. They launched a comprehensive initiative called Connect Boulder. And what that aimed to do was not only expand that free public Wi-Fi, but to examine the potential for a wider, maybe city-funded or city-built broadband network to make sure that everybody in their community had access to the same fast and affordable Wi-Fi. They used their engagement site, which is called Be Heard Boulder, to launch 3 different tools: a geospatial map, a survey, and a guest book to gather feedback and ideas from their community. Hold, please. We'll look at that site in just a second. They did a really fun thing, which is they crowdsourced their community to gather information about data regarding internet speeds. We'll look at that as well. And then they armed with that data, they launched a survey and discussion to get a little bit of a deeper dive as to how the community would like them to best provide expanded services. Oops, I went too far. So let's go look at Be Heard Boulder. So this is their community broadband page. Some of the things that Boulder did really well, I'm going to scroll on down here and show you their timeline for this project. Boulder was very clear as to where and how you could engage with this project. They created this timeline to show the participants and community where they were at in the process. And they also had a list of these public meetings. You can see the key dates where you could show up to actually speak to representatives from the government, in this instance, Chris and Julia from the city, about this project. I should take this moment to say that even though Bang the Table is an online community engagement company, we still believe that that in-person engagement is the most meaningful work you will do, and it's the most meaningful feedback that you'll get. So the internet is not meant to be a magic bullet for engagement. It's just a very strong support function for you. So we love public meetings, and yeah, don't be scared of them. Okay, so Boulder. They were very clear as to how they engaged. They have their key dates, they have their timeline. And as I mentioned, they crowdsourced internet speed. So I'm going to click on this map and show you what they've done. They asked their residents to drop a pin on this map. I'm going to zoom in a bit. And then once they dropped a pin, the residents were asked to run a Google speed test to crowdsource some data about how quick their internet was at different parts of the city. They then used that information that they got from the Google speed test to fill out a quick survey. What this looked like is that the city of Boulder collected more than 100 points of feedback all across their community. You can see ranging from one end to the other about what internet speeds were like for their residents and businesses. They then used that information to take a deeper dive. They asked their residents and business people to fill out a survey. Again, great way just to get that raw data, some quick information from folks. They also launched a guest book. Again, long-form feedback makes people feel really, really heard and really included. And what I love about this guest book, and I'll include links to all these sites as well, is they have a lot of for and against conversations going here, but people are saying things like, I don't think that Boulder should get involved in community broadband, but thanks so much for asking. They're getting a lot of really kind of positive and warm feedback from their community because they asked for this sort of long form feedback. Another thing that I want to show you that they did really, really well is they used a custom widget here on the Engagement HQ platform to host rich media. Anytime you have the ability to synthesize a project in video form or in an infographic or in a way that makes people who might not want to read all of that for any reason or another into something like this that's attractive, easy to understand, absolutely do it. Rich media can go a really, really long way in fostering some richer feedback from your community. Okay, I'm going to have a quick look at I see a question from you, Phil. Thank you so much for asking that. I'm going to answer that at the end of our time here. We've got about 15 more minutes. I'm going to talk, and then I look forward to all of your questions. Okay, let's pop over and talk about Austin, Texas. I think we have some Texans in the room. Did anyone say hi on chat? Thanks. Okay, Austin. Austin, Texas their city council proposed an ordinance to pay sick leave to all non-governmental employees. They also passed a resolution requiring the collection of public input both online and in person. I thought that was really forward thinking of them. They knew that in order to get feedback on such a meaningful policy change that would affect all of their residents and all of their business people, they really needed to go an extra step in trying to meet people where they were at. So they blended online and in-person engagement. They hosted 3 public meetings speaking to 125 Austinites, and then they utilized their engagement space, which is called Speak Up Austin, to collect online feedback. They launched ideation as well as survey and forum tools to collect a range of feedback, and then they collected more than 900 points of feedback from 180 participants. So you know where we're going. Let's go look at their site. Oh, I keep hitting the space bar and I mean to hit the escape button. Hey, Jason from Frisco. I love minor league baseball, and Frisco, Texas has a great minor league baseball stadium called the Rough Riders, or their team's called the Rough Riders. So hi, Jason from Frisco. All right, so let's talk about paid sick days for Austinites. I know the city of San Antonio is having a similar conversation, and my hometown of Dallas, I believe, might be having a conversation as well. So this is something that Texas is kind of having conversations about all over the place. But what Austin did well in this space is, again, they've got the life cycle of the project open here. They're showing the residents where they're at. They synthesized the information here. They've used some bullet points as to the whys behind this project. The why is always a great place to start. In government, we tend to talk about the wheres and the hows, but we don't always get to the whys. So anywhere you can start with the why, by all means. So one of my favorite things about this project is that they ask for personal narratives from people. They used a storytelling tool, and they asked people how paid sick leave would make a difference to them in their lives. So we have a couple of people that talk about how it would affect locally owned and operated businesses, as well as people that talk about needing to care for loved ones. So you get a kind of a richer narrative and a complete story around an issue when you're asking for this kind of personal feedback from your residents. They also used a forum where they asked some open-ended questions. As you can see, this was a hotly debated topic. They had more than 521 responses under the question, who should be covered under a policy that requires employers. They also asked what kind of circumstances should paid sick leave cover. So they're facilitating this conversation that, again, has very strong opinions on either side, but they're doing it in a public space. They also hosted 3 different public meetings to show folks that they could come and get engaged and get involved in person if they want to, ask those questions, share that feedback. And they did a really good job of closing the transparency loop by leaving this consultation live on their site. So anybody that maybe didn't participate in this conversation back in November can still come and see everything that was said. You can see the draft resolutions, the white papers, as well as the some links to the final report. On March 1st, the Austin City Council did end up adopting a paid sick days resolution for the city. So that is kind of the close of that project. I believe it takes effect in October of this year. Finally, we are going to talk about Lakewood, Colorado, which is where I used to work. And this project that we're going to work on or talk about is something that I worked on for 10 months with my boss, Allie, who I already mentioned. So near and dear to my heart. The city of Lakewood is a community of 150,000 people just outside of Denver. And in 2016, we started talking about our master plan, which I believe was 10 years old at the time. We knew we needed an update to reflect our very changing community and their needs. And so we launched a community engagement effort to span 10 months to make updates to that master plan. We hosted more than 200 people at public meetings and gathered more than 3,000 points of feedback online. I'll show you the website that we used and talk you through some of those processes. I think I might answer your question, Phil, as well as I talk about this project. But I will start by saying something that Councilwoman Dana Gutwein said to the Denver Post after the adoption of the master plan, which was, it means a lot when you get to hear or you get to have your input and see that your voice is being heard. What you have here really reflects what I hear in the community. And the data that we ended up with did really reflect what we thought we knew about the community. But it was nice to actually have more than 70 pages of public comment that reflected that. So the online space really gave us the data that we needed in order to make those decisions and formulate those goals. So this is the Imagine Lakewood site. Again, like Austin, Boulder, and Golden, all of these consultations have closed, but they're all of those cities have chosen to leave these spaces public for anybody that might not have been part of the conversation or want to refer back to what was said. So some things that Lakewood did well in this space, they used an ideation tool. I love brainstorming tools. This is, once you get a good brainstorming going, it's really hard to stop. It's also a really warm and fun and welcoming way to start the engagement process. You can ask people very specific targeted questions, or you can kick the door open and ask them what we did in Lakewood, which is, how do you imagine your city to grow? How would you like arts, parks, and recreation to change over the next 5 to 8 years? And you can see this online space very closely resembles the Post-it notes in a public meeting. That's fully intentional. The one thing that's nice about this is that you as a staff member don't go home with a stack of Post-it notes and go, oh gosh, who's going to transcribe these and how am I going to save them for FOIA and what are we going to do with them? They all live here in this online space. It's also nice for the participants because there are many times where you go and you might share your ideas on a Post-it note and see everybody's ideas on the wall, and it's very inspiring. But then you go home and you actually don't really remember what other people said, or you realize that you didn't read as many comments as you would have liked to, and there isn't really any way to go back and redo that. So hosting ideation in an online space is great. I think it gives people an opportunity to participate on their own time again and kind of let ideas bubble up over a matter of days, weeks, months, as opposed to, a single hour in person. So Lakewood did use this ideation tool. We'll pop back over and look at some of their other sites. I can speak from a staff perspective. Another thing that Lakewood did really well is we met residents where they were at. We didn't just host public meetings. That was part of the strategy, but we also went to the people. We set up a booth at our summer concert series, at our free rock and block party. We had branded cards directing people to this online space at the front desk of every recreation center and city facility. And we used all of our marketing resources to really drive attention to this online space. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end to answer Phil's question about marketing. So another thing that Lakewood did really well is they shared the data back at every single point of this process. Again, we were out there for 10 months. There were 2 different surveys that were launched, plus the ideation tool, plus some polling along the way. And in order to close that transparency loop and guide people along this process, we shared information back at every single step. That's what this looks like here. So we had 2,200 residents take a survey. We synthesized that information here in a way that was kind of quick and easy to read. Because we synthesized the information in this way, we were able to ask those kind of deeper dive questions in person. So if you feel like there isn't enough community theater in Lakewood, which was one of the points of feedback that we got, what does community theater mean to you? That means different things to different people. Do you want to participate or do you want to watch? So again, like starting with this really nice data set allows you to kind of dig a little bit deeper along the way, take people along the The goals at the end of this were synthesized and shared on this information. I'm going to talk about transparency again. I think that might be the last time I say it in this webinar, but closing the transparency loop, sharing the goals back. So once people see the survey results, the questions, the ideas, and then the goals, everything looks aligned. It looks like we listened, because we did, and we replied with what we heard back from the community and shared goals that were aligned with what they wanted. The last thing that I'll say is that when we presented this to City Council, when we presented the draft plan, we included a full report of every single piece of public comment that we received. So you can see those here. They are linked on this site, so you can view them on your own time if you'd like. But these appendices carry every single survey feedback point, every single comment that we received. It's more than 70 pages. And again, it showed our City Council that we just really did the work. And I think that went a long way in helping our City Council to pass that, the Imagine Lakewood Master Plan unanimously. We also got some nice press in the Denver Post for the amount of work that we did on this project. So I'll pop back over to slides. We will look at some key takeaways, and then we will do question and answer. Start thinking about what you'd like to know. Key takeaways from all 4 of these cities: how they found success, how they helped kind of have that meaningful conversation. They all blended online and traditional forms of engagement. They set clear instructions and timelines for how and when and where to engage. They shared clear, factual information about the project before asking for feedback. To speak a bit about trolling, one way to really start off on a bad foot is just to invite people to talk about a project without framing the project for them. I don't want to be a broken record, but frame the project with some really clear and easy to understand information. Each of these cities used a variety of tools and methods to collect richer feedback from their communities. Why is a variety of tools important? Because a person that's comfortable filling out a survey might not be comfortable with leaving long-form feedback. A person that wants to leave long-form feedback might not want to drop a pin on a map. If you give them all of those options, you're going to get more feedback than you would if you just gave them one thing to choose from or one way to engage. Again, I'll share these slides, so if you're writing furiously, please don't worry about that. Key takeaway number 5 is that they used social media as a megaphone, not a discussion space. Social media is critical to these types of projects to tell people where you're listening. There's only a certain number of times as the communication manager for the Imagine Lakewood project that I had to say, hey, Nextdoor user, hey, Facebook user, thank you so much for that point of feedback or for that idea. Please pop on over to the Imagine Lakewood page so you can share it and be officially part of the record. I only had to say that a couple of times before word got out that Facebook was a place for listening, but not necessarily as a place for information, but not necessarily a place for engagement. All of these municipalities closed transparency loops. Oh, I said I wasn't going to say that again. I did. By sharing back what they've heard. Won't talk any more about that. They all fostered trust in the process by leaving the consultations public. I think having that repository of information either on your city site or in the engagement space is really critical for encouraging a longer term conversation with your community. Ooh, excuse me. And then most importantly, it's time for a drink. All right, most importantly, all of these city councils and staff members followed up their conversations with action. None of these projects are out lingering in the universe. Study sessions were had, proposals were drafted, policy was changed, and the conversation moves on. So if your community starts to tie their feedback with things that they see show up in the newspaper, everybody's happy. I think with that, I'm at risk of becoming a total frog here. I will say thank you very much and kick it open for questions. There is the Q&A box at the bottom. When you use that, it just gets sent directly to me, so you don't have to worry about it being a perfectly typed, fully formed question. I will be able to see it and answer it. And Phil, I think I will start with you. Phil, I will send you the slides. And how did we inform the community of the online engagement space? I would say the best way to do this is to sit down and write a list of every single thing that you have available to you that's free. Always start with the free place. In any given city, that might include notices and utility billings. Certainly includes all of your social media channels, all of your digital channels. It is a tile on the homepage of your website or a call to action. It is space in your e-newsletters and any physical newsletters or newspapers that might be delivered to your house from the city. And then in the case of Imagine Lakewood, we really wanted to maximize it as much as we could. So we used yard signs. We had some yard signs made and had those put at all of our public spaces. So if you were walking into the recreation center or into Bear Creek Lake Park, which saw 400,000 visitors per year, you're going to see imaginelakewood.org. I think it was .org. imaginelakewood.com. Where, and in some instances, if you brand a project or you brand an engagement space in a way that's interesting like that, you don't need to say a lot more around it. Sometimes the URL is enough to get people there just on curiosity alone. We also did sunglasses. We did branded sunglasses that we handed out at the summer concert series. We all carried business cards with us that had the URL on them that invited people to participate. We gave them to people at grocery stores, people that we met in coffee shops, of course, public meetings. That's one of my favorite things to do for public meetings is to send everyone away with something that invites them to the engagement space. How many times have you been driving away from a meeting, whether it be for work or otherwise, and you think, oh gosh, I really wish I could have said that. You know, with that traditional model of public meetings, you don't get a take back on that as a participant. So invite your meeting attendees that show up in person to also engage online later. It'll give them time to really synthesize what they've heard and share more ideas in that way. Other ways of informing people of the online engagement space, I would say ask them. You know, in Lakewood, we really tried to meet our residents where they were at. We would ask people, you know, what media they paid attention to, what newspapers they read, what radio stations they listened to. If you have the availability to do any sort of paid advertising, then definitely go out to your community and ask where they pay attention and where they like to get information from you, and go from there. Phil, I hope that answered your question. I'm going to open up this Q&A tool and see what else is out there. Okay, you haven't said anything about trolling. Please tell us a little bit more about how you manage the conversation. Okay. So all of these sites that we have looked at today are on the Engagement HQ platform, which has a moderation service attached to it. We have global moderators that read every comment within 2 hours of them being posted to make sure that the conversation stays safe and on topic. If you don't have an engagement space that you're currently using, I would say to be very clear with your community about what your expectations are for participation. And don't be afraid if things get off topic to kind of direct back, as you would in a public meeting. Inevitably, someone shows up and they want to talk about parking and you're talking about open space. And that we would say, Margaret, thank you so much for that comment about parking. We're actually talking about open space today. Here's a place where you can write that down, and we'll definitely get that to the right people. Don't be afraid to do that in the online space. Don't be afraid to call people out for not staying on topic. But I think anywhere that you can be very explicit about what you will and won't tolerate in the online space. That's not to say that you censor and delete, just set the expectations in advance. I think is a good place to start. Are there any other questions I can answer for anyone about the case studies or general community engagement questions? Please feel free to ask those now. Otherwise, I will say thank you so much. Please tweet at me at Megan Rubel, that's my URL, or reach out if you want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into data and analytics behind community engagement. I would love to talk about that. Also follow along or tweet at Bang the Table. Let us know what you thought of the webinar today. We certainly appreciate having you. Yeah, and to that I'll say I think we're done for the day. Thank you again for co-hosting with us, Kirsten and ELGL. I look forward to seeing everyone's faces on